Arabuni, Tanzania. I'm together with my Africa Director, Beatrice.
Good morning, everyone. Habari za asubuhi. Nimeisema vizuri wa Tanzania. You know, when we are in Tanzania, we have to speak. We should be very careful when speaking English, Kiswahili. So I know John will be watching closely. My name is Beatrice Ogutu. I lead the team at ICS. We focus on preventing and responding to violence in home, school, and community settings. We use our experiences to inform policy and the scale up of what works to prevent violence against children and now intimate partner violence as well. Thank you and glad to be here.
A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Dar es Salaam for those who are not from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. My name's Carol Francis Mango, and I work for Women Fund Trust. Women Fund Tanzania Trust is the only feminist women's fund based here in Tanzania, and we work around children rights, prevention of violence against women and children. We also support in a very major way collective actions and collective organizing through supporting the women's movement in Tanzania. And through our work, we've been partners in this learning initiative, and we are so very honored to be here today. Thank you.
Good morning. My voice is not very good. I am recovering from a severe cold. My name is John Kalage. I'm the Executive Director for Hakelim. Hakelim is one of the vibrant CSO in the education sector that works to promote and ensure that children in Tanzania have access to quality education in a safer environment. We mainly work in three areas. We work in the area of policy monitoring and policy influencing. We work in promotion of transparency and accountability and citizen engagement and participation. In the area of VAC prevention, we know and we believe that the school cannot, children cannot learn effectively if the schools are not safe. So we try to ensure that the policies promote a safe environment in schools, but also communities and stakeholders participate in prevention of violence against children. Thank you. Welcome to Tanzania.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, that's a bit loud. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angunjiri. I work for an organization called LVCT Health as the Senior Technical Advisor in the Gender-Based Violence Program, a specific bias towards violence against children prevention and response. We are based in Nairobi, Kenya, but we have offices across 34 of our 47 counties within Kenya, so we are big. What does LVCT Health do? Primarily, we started as a HIV prevention, care and treatment program, but we soon realized that HIV does not just work alone. There are other issues to do with gender-based violence. And so we occupy that space when it comes to intimate partner violence, prevention and response, and my area, violence against children, prevention and response. How we work is we apply a model called research policy practice, RPP. So our research is primarily to understand why violence occurs in the community. What are the risk factors? What are the protective factors? So then we can come up with very specific interventions to address these risk factors and make the communities safer for our children and adolescent girls. For the policy, we sit in the policy tables at national level, at county level, where we translate our research findings to improve the systems when it comes to violence against children prevention and response. And for the practice angle, we work directly with service providers, giving them all the skills that they require, advocating for resources so that our facilities, our schools, our service providers at community and the health system, the whole multi-sectoral actors can actually offer child-responsive services to any survivors that they come across in the society. So that's LVCT Health for you. Santini.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Jane Thiomi. I work with Anne. I'm the director in charge of GBV program at LVCT Health.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Kati Maternowska, and I'm professor of honorary professor of violence prevention for young people at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. I'm really happy to be back in Tanzania. I used to live here in Kigamboni about 17 years ago when I had little boys. And so it's always nice to come back to Tanzania. I am one of the people who did the assessment, along with Heidi Loning Boise, who I hope is online and is based in South Africa. So we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback. And apologies for a very long, dense, and complicated report, but it's because of your work that it was long, dense, and complicated, and we're here to tease out the best of it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm called Asimwe Albert. I work as a regional program coordinator at Children's Rights and Violence Prevention Fund. CRVPF is a regional intermediary organization that supports community organizations to prevent violence and against children and young people. We basically provide grants and capacity strengthening so that the community organizations which are closer to the households, families, and communities can prevent violence against children. And I'm happy to be here.
Very much. And I think now I'll go back to my class.
Okay, good morning. My name is Moses Komagum, and I work for IIDC. I'm the program lead. IIDC, I think all of you know. So, IIDC is a learning partner organization. We facilitate learning for impactful programming. And we also combine that with the technical assistance in the area of program design, measurement, and adaptation and scaling innovative model that have been proven as evidence-based. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deo from Impact and Innovations Development Center. The team leader there. And great to see all of you. Some people after a very long time. Thank you.
Is a leader of the team leader in the room.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Waswa John Baptist. I'm chair of the board of IIDC. I'm very happy to be here. We shall talk a little more later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And like I said, I'm also Samali, part of the IIDC team. Is there anyone who hasn't introduced themselves apart from the gentlemen who are helping us to go live? Okay. So we have a team of 5 gentlemen. They're just helping us to be, heard and seen by the participants who are attending virtually. Just bear with us because we thought it would be good for, them to attend this first day. But yeah, they're strictly here for that reason. So that they might not introduce themselves by name for you to know, and we can always share their the contact of their company later when we finish this meeting. Okay, so we've come to the end of the self-introductions, and now I just want to let you know the objectives of this meeting. I think each one of you have noticed that there is a folder in front of you. Inside that folder is a small booklet where we've tried to give a little bit of information about this meeting. We've sent a lot of information to you prior to coming here, but we thought that for your reference as we are sitting here, you could still, find time to read, one or two. So within the booklet, some of the information that we have is the program agenda. We are here for strictly 2 days. And within those 2 days, we are going to look at 2 issues. The first day, we are going to focus on validating the findings of the external assessment of the Learning Initiative on preventing violence against children in East Africa. And on the second day, we will reflect on the progress and review the direction and shifts of the the learning initiative. We can't be a learning initiative when we don't learn and rethink our direction. So it's timely and very important for us to talk about the strategic direction and the shifts. I've been reminded, and I thank you very much, that perhaps the participants online would like to introduce themselves, but maybe I can also try to help out, because I'm privileged to be identifying most of them that are there. The first one, who is Samariti Lutaya, is me via this laptop. Then on the extreme left is IDC Uganda, our IT officer. Then we have Josephine, that is our finance and administration manager. She's called Josephine Igwe. And then Chirunda BR is Chirunda Bob Ramadan, also a staff member at IDC. And Blaine T is Blaine Tekla from, someone wants to pronounce it better. Claire, would you like to try? Take it, tell. Thank you, I've got it. Blaine, I'm so sorry that I'm not able to pronounce your surname correctly. Please forgive me. Yeah, but yes, that's Blaine from Porticus. And we're expecting more people to join. Heidi is very keen on joining when Kat is presenting, and other funders from CIF are also keen on attending, so we'll be letting you know when they join. Thank you very much for alerting me about that. So yes, these are the objectives of our meeting, and it will be 2 days. So today we are going to do a lot of like reading and listening to what was found out and validating meaning. We agree, disagree, modify, and give information that can help to finalize the report. So at this point now, we are going to have a few remarks, and we'll have remarks from two, institutions. The first one will be from IDC, and then some remarks from Wellspring. At this point, allow me to invite the Chairman, Board of Directors at IDC. I don't know whether I should say JB Waswa or Mr. JB Waswa. Which one is correct? For those who are, is it Mr. Waswa or JB Waswa? Because when you're twin in Uganda, they don't say Mr. So maybe the JB Waswa is the correct one. For me, it sounds weird, saying it just. So you're most welcome to address us.
Thank you very much, Sam. Actually, you're right. It is JB Waswa, because when you are twin, you are born with those titles. So it's weird. In English, you are twins at saying Mr., but back home, you don't add those titles. Okay. The representatives of Wellspring Philanthropic Fund, representatives of other funding donor partner organizations, chief executives of partner organizations and learning initiative, and other executives who have come with the CEOs, Professor Catherine from University of Edinburgh, all our invited guests, dear participants, Mabibi na Mabwana, I'm Jambo. So, as I said, my name is Waswa. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Impact and Innovation Development, IIDC, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Dar es Salaam as members and friends of East African Pvac Learning Initiative. It's great to meet people. I've read about many of you. I read reports from your organizations, but it's great to meet physically. It's a very good thing. This is our second joint meeting as partners in this initiative this year. The first one was in Nairobi in June. Since 2015, we have had several learning convenings of partner implementing organizations, governments, and our funding partners. However, today's convening is special for a number of reasons. In this meeting here, we have the highest participation of chief executives of our partner organizations. I wish to welcome all our partner agency CEOs in a special way. Secondly, in this meeting, we have a mix of partners that have been part of this learning initiative for close to 8 years, the veterans, as we call them, as well as new members, some of whom are barely 2 years in this learning community. You are all most welcome, but I extend my special welcome to the new members. And especially also welcome other development partners who are participating physically and virtually. Welcome them very much. Over the last 8 years, we have worked together on a journey of learning in order to improve our practice in implementing impactful interventions to prevent and respond to violence against children in East Africa. And for the last 8 convenings, we have met largely to share knowledge, skills, and experiences that improve competencies as part of our learning journey. Today, in a special way, we meet to harvest and reflect on how far we have come and how much further we can go on this journey of ensuring that we make substantial difference in the lives of children that are at risk of multiple forms of abuse and violence in our region. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to commend all our implementing partners and your respective teams for the very constructive and improvement-oriented partnership that we continue to have, and the unique opportunity that you continue to avail us as IIDC to work and learn with you. I, in a special way, and on behalf of you all, implementing partners, wish to thank our donor partner, Wellspring Philanthropic Fund, for the invaluable support both to IIDC and to the work of implementing partners over the years. As we all know, it is almost impossible for implementing partner organizations to be learning oriented, to try out new ways of doing things, to experiment, if they are not supported by a learning oriented, flexible, and progressive funding partner. We thank Wellspring's Philanthropic Fund for being that kind of funding partner. Thank you very much. With every passing day, let's clap harder. Thank you for that, Makofi. With every passing day, there is a growing uncertainty in the world. We see an increasing number of violent conflicts, political instability, economic crisis, evident harmful consequences of climate change, and unprecedented migration patterns. All these developments impact directly and very adversely on children everywhere, regardless of where they happen. And people are moving so much for various reasons. Where I live, on the Kampala suburb, we have so many people. On my street, I have people from Yemen, from Ukraine. We had people from South Sudan. Now they were joined by people from Sudan. And so many other people. People are always moving because of different reasons. All these developments impact directly and very adversely on children everywhere, regardless of where they happen. Either children are directly at the center of these crises, losing lives, being displaced, being abused and harmed, and losing opportunities for growth and development, or the very much needed resources for supporting children's well-being and protection from violence and abuses are being diverted to other apparently more visible and more urgent needs and priorities. Yet we all know that nothing can be more important, more valuable, or even more urgent than nurturing and protecting the future of humanity, the children of today, for they are both the present and the future of our societies. amidst all the global difficulties and the complexities we are challenged to be, amidst all the global difficulties and complexities, we are challenged to be even more innovative, more impactful in our resolve to prevent and redress violence against our most vulnerable group. I wish to end by re-echoing the message of my board vice chairperson, Salome, during the last convening in Nairobi. Salome observed that almost 10 years ago in 2015, the world made a commitment to children, namely to end all forms of violence by 2030, which is a few years away. All of us in this room are part of that commitment. We dare not lie to our children. It's my hope that our reflections over the next 2 days will inspire us to build on our achievements, learn from our missed opportunities, and leverage our collective strength to work with renewed energy towards ending violence against children in our region within our lifetime. On behalf of IEDDC Board of Directors, I thank you and wish you constructive deliberations over the next these 2 days. Thank you very much.
From my learning perspective, sometimes it's very important to take a minute to process when you've just had very important information. So I'll give you that minute. Please process what you've had and write down what is important and key for you. As I prepare the next remarks to come. Okay, I think Krista is ready to address us. So next we are going to have remarks from Wellspring.
Good morning again. Lovely to see all of you. When we embarked on this journey with IIDC and all of you 8 to 10 years ago, we had no idea what it would become. And this is what it has become. And we're so, so proud to have been a part of that journey with you. You all have done so many great things in your countries, for your children, for your communities. You've learned together. You've refined your programming. You have developed new ideas, new programming. Now we're into social norms, which is we all know, and gender norms, which we all know is the basis for many of the violations that we see against children and women and others in our communities. And I'm just very humbled to have been a part of that journey, a small part. You started out with Michael Gibbons, our previous director of the Global Children's Rights Program, and with Maureen Greenwood Baskin, who was the previous program officer in the program, with Anna Windsor as well. Again, they all send you greetings. They wish they could be here as well to see you in person. But I just want to really say that we're just so proud of what has been achieved with this learning initiative. And I know the elephant in the room and what that is. I don't know if that's a term that we use in East Africa, but the elephant in the room is Wellspring's Wind Down, which is coming over the next years. And as was indicated in the email letter we sent from our president, John Taylor, and as well the follow-up letter from Maureen Greenwood Baskin, we are committed to a phased transition of the wind down. It will be gradual over the next 2 to 3 years. It will not be just a steep drop-off. We will continue to be with you, and we want to be able to support you so that you can continue to have impact in the future. It's going to be a difficult period for some of you. We understand that. We feel saddened by that, but we know that you've been grown so strong over these years that we've worked with you that you can weather the storm. I just want to reiterate that all current contracts are being honored. Contracts that are in process and applications that are in process are being processed as normal, so there'll be no change there. We will have some significant resources to bring to this next 2 to 3 years to support you. We want to hear from you as well as to your needs. the things that you see that might be helpful for you as you think about this next phase of your work without Wellspring after a few years from now. We've provided you with some outside support in the past with CBLI, for instance, the Capacity Building Leadership Institute, with communication strategies, with financial resilience strategies, operational support, mentoring, second-tier leadership, women's CEO groups. So, you know, the kinds of things that I mentioned here are just some of the things that could be part of an exit strategy for you. So, again, we are sorry, we're saddened about our departure from the space, but over the next months we'll be making our decisions and deliberations very carefully about how we continue to work with you over the next time period so we can set you up for success, continued success. I just wanted to say that I think 10 years ago nobody was talking about prevention. And here we are in East Africa, and that's all we're talking about. We're talking about how do we intervene in advance of violations against children? How do we bring communities together, bring families together, bring school leaders, teachers together to say no to violence against children and girls? And you all have done that. You all have created evidence-based strategies. Some of you have gotten to the point where the government wants to scale up your programming. You should be proud of all the things you've done. We got social norms program, we've got parenting program, we've got school violence prevention program. We have a Bogota back ministerial coming up in November. The governments of Colombia and Sweden who are hosting this, and some of you will be able to present your work there, or at least IIDC is going to be presenting on your behalf, providing materials and videos to show the strong work that's being done here that others in the world might want to replicate. So you've seen the culmination to a certain extent of a lot of the work you've done through this learning initiative, and I can only see that you all are going to keep growing in the future and keep bringing impact, driving impact for better lives for your children, your families, and your communities. So thank you once again, and I'm here, I'm available for questions and concerns, not right now, but over the days, we can meet at break time. I'm available that you can send emails to myself, to Gladys, to Caroline, to Kathy. We're all here for you, and thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Krista. I learned one thing from Mrs. Susan Kajura, that you should always strive to start strong and end strong. And by saying that, I'm not saying that there's something called ending. Nothing is ending. It's just a small change, a big change, yes, that of course we've had this news from Wellspring. But of course, we want to make you proud. We want to commit that by the time anything happens, you will have strong organizations that are continuing to improve the lives of children. We know we are contributors. I want to give you an example. A few years ago, TPO Uganda, I think, if I'm not wrong, started to get limited support from Wellspring. But then they said, but we are committed to be part of this initiative, and we are committed to continue, sharing our experiences and learning together and growing together. So in the same spirit, I think as an initiative, we are strong, and we have always been talking about a systems approach to scaling up whatever we are doing. It's because we are foresighted and we know that a lot has to continue even where we are working in a shrinking space. So no worries, and we also acknowledge and appreciate that there are several donors that are keen on hearing about this initiative. Where we need support from, funders like you, we know that we are well positioned and well placed to get that support. But our contribution to preventing violence against children is even going to, be a lot, because we really want to make you proud. So we hope that these 4 years we can, do that and you see it happening. I'm sort of like committing the team on their behalf. But anyway, this is perhaps the reason why we have to think and plan for the future direction of this initiative. And when we go from the perspective of saying, how do we make this stronger than ever before? This is the time we are going to talk about it. When I was on the plane, I read the Musafiri magazine, and there was one quotation when one of the authors was trying to write about change and change being constant. And in her quote, she said, "It is not always the strongest species that survive, but those that respond to change very quickly that will always survive." The Learning Initiative is an initiative of adaptation scale-up, and adaptation means learn, reflect, and redo things, do things differently and better. That's why we are here. We want to do things better. But eventually, it's all about contributing to reduction of violence against children. Whatever we've been doing, we want to do it better, we want to be energized, and we want to make Wellspring proud as our maiden funder. Thank you very much for your remarks. I wanted to pull up the energies of the people in the room, and I hope you're together with me. I see several nods of the head. So we are going to go into this meeting thinking properly about how we want to shape this and make it even produce better results from what you've seen so far. I don't know whether there are any other reactions to what we have had so far. It's unique that even after the welcoming remarks, there might be reactions. But we are leaders, Having all these brains in this room, we really need to tap into the expertise. So if there are any reactions, if you feel like, oh, among the things which we put there regarding, the motivation to join, and from what I've heard, I think I missed out something, or I really want to comment on this one. If there's anyone who wants to say something about what has happened so far, this is the time. I would, invite a hand if there's any. If there's no, we will go to the next step. Look, I will not look, because sometimes when you look, people feel like, somebody, do you want me to say something? No, let it be, straight decision, and by a show of hands. Oh, thank you. I will take on her first, and then I come to you, please.
Thank you very much. It's really to thank Wellspring. For so many years, you have been consistent in supporting the work on violence prevention. And yes, there is change. And also, we thank you on how you are preparing us to experience this transition. So, really, thank you very much. And of course, to IIDC for bringing us together to experience this news together, so that we can give support to each other, and they also share ideas on how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prosi, for the words of gratitude to Wellspring.
Thank you very much, Samali, the board chair, and Wellsprings. Just to give a little reflection in terms of transition, I know TPO faced out, at some point, and we got some exit grant. However, as a learning organization, we continued, to replicate, the initiatives. Some of you might have read, one of our community-led initiatives, Watch My Neighbor. We continued and replicated, the Watch My Neighbor in a different context. And to tell you the truth, they are really, really amazing results in terms of that, reflection and transition. As TPO, we will continue to integrate learning in all aspects of other programming. But probably to IIDC and also Wellsprings, as you face out, I think what is critical is all the initiatives that we've documented. We need to put them out there. We need to publish them. The evidence, based, strategies need to come out. And for me, I think that will be sustainable in terms of the phase out. If people can learn what we've documented, all the initiatives, and they can replicate those initiatives in different contexts, I think that will be a plus. Thank you.
For the words of wisdom about how we can, phase it out properly.
Yeah, I want to join my colleagues to sincerely thank Wellspring for the support that they provided to us. Speaking of Hakelim, we took the initiative to join efforts with others to fight violence against children with a specific focus in schools. But we didn't have capacity, experience, and skills, but we had ambitions. Through the learning initiative, Hakelim has become one of the strong advocates, one of the strong implementers of interventions that are aiming at addressing violence against children, especially in schools, and at a policy level as well. We are quite strong in the policy, but we needed to generate evidence from what works, and we learned from our colleagues, able to influence the government to adopt some of the initiative that we learned from our colleagues. So we would like actually to thank you, IIDC, who have made us to have a strong connection with voice and support that we received from Wellspring, which enables us to implement different interventions at a grassroots level and also at a policy level. We will continue the collaboration. Our friendship and our initiative to collaborate with the others will not die because of the big elephant that is in the room. We will continue. Thank you.
I think we'll keep it at that. Oh, there are two more hands. And the hands are from Susan. So which Susan should go first? Oh, yeah.
No, thank you very much. I was just thinking, I think we're one of the veterans. This is Bantwana. Then we were Bantwana Initiative of World Education, Boston. Now we're Bantwana Initiative of Uganda, locally registered NGO. And I think maybe to Krista and the team, I don't think there's any organization here that hasn't been strengthened, our systems, our capacity, to be able to do what we're doing. I was one of those people who was a little skeptical when IIDC formed this forum, and I've never have foreseen where we are today and what we have received from the partnership and the collaboration, not just within Ugandan organizations, but also East Africa. Where would I have seen my friends from Tanzania, from Kenya? I think it's just amazing. And the friendship and the solidarity we all feel. And in that way, I think we're stronger than we've ever been before. People try to do an East African Union, but I think this is it. And it's been achieved. But also, I was thinking how timely this all is. It's perfect timing. We're now thinking the direction we're coming together. So I don't know what foresight IIDC had in knowing that the change is coming. And I don't think we can be more prepared for it than we are. But just to say how much we salute you, thank you, as Wellspring and IIDC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Susan?
Thank you very much. Just to also stand and reiterate what has been said, but to re-emphasize the fact that, Wellsprings, you have touched lives, you have touched issues, you have supported growth, you have strengthened systems, you have strengthened collaboration. And we would really like to say a big thank you to you. And as you go out, just know that all this team, all the institutions that you have touched will definitely continue to do what they need to do and impact lives. Because as we talk about violence against children, against women, yes, we have worked, but it continues to be, to grow. So there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And I believe that together, the collaboration that has started will continue to ensure that we work on this. We want to say thank you to CivSource. They have been with us and walked the journey with us as well. And IIDC, Deo, Samali, and the team, we cannot thank you enough. It's interesting that oftentimes, people come together and talk about community of practice. Nonetheless, this innovation, the way we are working together as a team, I think has gone beyond what the generalized community of practice is. So this is something to take on, probably to show and, go out to the world and say there is a better way of doing things, and that together we are strong, together we can work on issues and ensure that we learn but also impact lives. So thank you very much. And yes, it's a challenge to us. If we stop this, we will have failed the world. We will have failed the children. So I hope that the learning will be, taken forward and continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Listening to the testimonies makes me feel like some of the moments I've felt that have been so precious in my life, like listening to a speech at a wedding when a parent is sending off a child and the child is going into marriage and the child is going to now become the head of a new family. So the Learning Initiative has had a parent, that's Wellspring, and now the parent is saying, you're grown up, you're big enough, you can manage marriage yourself. So Big Mama is watching. So how are we going to do this without Big Mama? We need to make Big Mama proud. So the giant will be proud, no worries. We will do this and we will continue to contribute to prevention of violence against children, working together as a strong joint team. Okay, thank you very much. So I want to us to go into the next one, but I also know Dar es Salaam is not a joke in terms of heat. So when you're sitting in one place, sometimes it's too hot, yet there are some ACs around. So when you need an energizer and specifically to stand in front of that, please alert me, and maybe we can stretch for now 1 minute, and if anyone has one that is stylish for executive directors, not me of course, we can have one, and then we go into the next presentation. But I want that people stand and enjoy the S's for even if it's 30 seconds, it will do you good, and then we can sit back after the 36. Let's stretch up, please. Thank you for making my work easy. Commanding my seniors is not a joke, but I'm also like trying to be like, yeah, I can do it. I don't know whether anyone has an energizer and we do it. No. Albert says no, I say no. But there is a lot of, fresh air, not fresh, but of course cool air in front of those machines. We can use that. And then we can go into the next presentation. Okay. I humbly request that we take our seats. We are not going to have so many presentations before we go for break tea. So we are just going to have one input presentation from IIDC. So let's take our seats and we have an introductory overview of the learning initiative. When we finish that, we'll definitely go into break tea and be able to stretch more.
Good morning once again. I want to thank Samali for moderating this first part and all the previous speakers and getting us to where we are with the energy that we have in the room. This brief intervention that I have to make primarily is for the benefit of our new colleagues. As the board chair indicated, there are people who are veterans in this initiative, who know the story from beginning to end. Maybe this might not speak too much to them, but there are those of us who are new in this initiative. And I was with Joyce and say, wait, this idea, some are grappling even to understand where did it come from, how has it, what is it really about? Yeah, they found it midway. Yeah, of course we had a conversation during the onboarding process, but I thought for what we are going to hear and what we are going to be discussing, it is important to have some leveling for all of us so that we have that background. I was laughing at somebody, she was looking for energizers. I want to tell her, not in this group. They are in the other group. The Hassans of this world. This group is a different group. Yeah. So I'm already introduced myself, so I don't need to introduce myself again. So really, the year was 2015. Back home in Uganda and in my local language, there is a saying, the Ugandans might be able to, Walirudawa. Where were you in 2015? You can all ask yourself, where were you? Maybe you were in a different organization. Maybe you were in the same organization, different geography. One thing I'm sure of, you were a different age. Yeah? That is, even somebody agrees. Yes. Okay, so the year was 2015. The event was called a program learning event on violence against children in and out of school in East Africa. The venue was Hotel Africana in Kampala, Uganda. The theme was developing a common learning agenda on preventing and responding to violence against children in and around schools. Lessons from research and practice. And the convener of that event was Elevate Children Funders Group. Who was in that room that day among us? Can you please put up your hand if you were part of that that meeting? Susan, yeah, only one. Wow. This is very interesting. Okay. Yeah, okay. Only one person? Okay. I joined them. I was also in the room. But I was not IIDC, representing IIDC then. Specifically, I was representing a consultancy firm, Development Links Consult. So it is in this room that the idea of the learning initiative was birthed. I'm very humbled for all the credit that speakers have given to IIDC and for the visionary, thinking about this. But honestly speaking, no, it was not our idea. IIDC was not even in the room then. It was a very fairly nascent entity, not what it is today. So it is in this convening. It was a well thought through convening, meeting, learning. It was called a learning event. No, program learning event. Yeah. And I thought that I went into that report of that meeting and tried to pick the key messages, the synthesis that was done about the deliberations during that meeting. And I felt they would help all of us to get a clearer context. But before I say that, who was in the room? We had government representatives from East Africa, most of them from Uganda, because the meeting was in Uganda. We had UN agency representatives, UNICEF Uganda, UNICEF Tanzania, and others. We had bilateral agency representatives, USAID. We had funding agencies, members of Elevate Funders Group. We had international child-focused organizations, Save the Children, and all others that are working on issues of children. We had representatives of the academia, because you see the theme was linking research and practice. So we had folks from Makerere University, Columbia University, London School, and we also had over 50 representatives of Pvac implementing partners from across East Africa, representing some of the organizations in this room. The total participation was around 83 participants. It was very intense, very engaging, and the number of key messages that came from that conversation. One, there was a recognition that a lot of work on violence against children, very important work from a human rights and economic, perspective. A lot of that work was not being well prioritized, and most of the interventions focused largely on awareness raising. Consequently, that we are working on the surface and not addressing the root causes, such as social norms that perpetuate violence. So there was a challenge to deepen the programming. Two, that both bottom-up and top-down approaches were necessary in order to address the issue of violence. But that we needed to strengthen both formal and non-formal child protection systems, and also maximize synergies between both of them. Given the complexity and diversity of VAC forms, there was an introduction of an interesting concept, the ecological model for addressing VAC. The need to use an ecological systems approach. And that implied and required collaboration between different agencies of government, different state agencies, between state and civil society organizations, as well as between CSOs themselves. If we were to have successful and impactful programming across the different levels and pieces of the ecosystem. Furthermore, there was a recognition that creative approaches to violence prevention needed to be devised. Not business as usual, awareness creation, but more robust approaches that needed to be devised, piloted, and scaled up. Especially focusing on transforming social norms that underpin violence against children. There was also a recognition of the intersectionality between VAC, violence against children, and violence against women. And although the focus in this meeting was on schools, but was a recognition that schools be places where children and young people can be helped to acquire positive social norms and attitudes related to power and healthy relationships and address the core drivers of both VAC and VAO. There was a recognition that because processes of social change generally are slow and complex, you program implementers as well as the funders need to be patient to build learning into our program cycles. That's not a quick fix addressing, because we are dealing with social change, and it's not just you click a button and change happens. You need to take time to learn. And that effective ways of generating evidence about what works require being clear about what the expected results, conducting quality baselines and endlines. Basically, that if you want to be effective, you need to know what you intend to achieve. But at the same time, be open to learning along the way. You begin to see the ideas that have shaped the learning initiative. There was a discussion around monitoring for accountability and as opposed to monitoring for learning. If an advocacy for a shift from M&E systems that basically focus on pleasing donors, just proving that we spent the money well, to systems that help implementers to learn and improve what they do. There was a lot. There was this interesting recognition. This was, I think, when Inspire was being worked on, 2015, Kati would know, yeah? And there was a feeling, because we had global and local actors, so the language of evidence was very emergent in the room. Feeling that while there is an emerging body of evidence on effective, promising, and emerging practices that later became Inspire, developing countries are contributing less to research evidence, and the data on VAC not well segregated. At the time, it was recent. They called the recent, I picked it as it is, the recent RCT by Raising Voices on the Good Schools program. It was recent then. I don't know whether it's still it's, it's grown a bit. It was pretty much the one that was standing out. Just one of the few examples of a clearly valid program from a developing country context. That was a challenge because we knew that many organizations were doing a lot of work, and I think that's the frustration that came with the Inspire One, that the interventions from developing countries were limited. Whether that challenge has been addressed now, after several years, well, we will know. But that was felt then. There were a number of implications that people reflected on, saying, based on all this, what does this then imply for what we do? Yeah, I might not go into all of them, but the focus on social norms was very evident. The issue of experimentation, testing, and trying out as an approach, and the need for partners to work with funders to test, to innovate, to take risks with programs and generate evidence came out. Then the idea of supporting collaborative projects, with different agencies working together came out. The real key idea was the one at the bottom, and this came from leaders like you, because they were powerful presentations, some by very accomplished professionals, especially from the global north. I was one of them, but I was coming from the global south. So actually sitting in the room, you felt like, wow, this is really new to the field of VAC, evidence, measurement, process-oriented approaches, the language of social norms, a good blend of theory and practice. So it's understandable that some of us in the room and many peers of mine, colleagues, felt like, well, this is powerful, but it can't stop here. How do we, because it was challenging people to rethink what they were doing, to approach it differently. So there was inspiration, but the partners felt like, how do we embark on this journey? We see we need to go there. We want to go there, but how shall we get there? So that is when the partners, especially the implementing partners, I remember the voices, request need in building an organizational culture of learning and bring on board some external input of a learning partner where necessary. And there is where this learning initiative was born. So it was not our idea as IIDC, no. We were later privileged to be onboarded to nurture this initiative and to facilitate it, which is a privilege that we've really enjoyed over the years. And to shape the ideas and put them into something more concrete, working with Wellspring advisors, that was called then, anonymous. I used to tease them that you are not anonymous really. You think so, but whenever I see anonymous, I know who is anonymous. So Wellspring picked this up. is a member of the Elevate Funders Group and wanted really to get this going with the partners that they are working with. And so they gave support to IIDC, for which we are eternally very grateful, to set up this learning initiative, co-creating it with the partners that they were working with. We spent some time thinking through together with the different agencies. And those of you here might remember that the following year in 2016, in another venue in Bugolobi, in Uganda again, this learning initiative was officially launched. With 10 partners from Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, with IIDC as the learning partner and facilitator. But it was understood from the beginning that this is partner initiated because they requested for it. It was going to be partner driven. It's going to be partner centered, doing what the partners needed, not what IIDC necessarily wanted, and also partner owned. So, yeah, I know that in the report you will see the IIDC initiative, and I think that's how it's generally perceived, even in the room, but it's not really that. It is an initiative of you, the partners, and we've tried our very best to keep true. It's not easy. Sometimes you feel like, okay, we need to drive this, but we're always intentionally trying to keep the focus on ensuring that it's partner-driven and partner-owned and centered. What has been the focus over the years of this initiative? The focus has been on designing refined and measurable Pvac programs. You can reflect on the context and the concerns. Refined and measurable programs that can be measured and that results can be objectively articulated. Because that is the only way you can be sure you are making a difference, you are not causing harm, but that's also how you impact on the global field. 2, generating and communicating evidence of impactful interventions globally. You remember the concern, because it's all be driven from what inspired the initiative. Great work being done, it is not documented, it is not known. So help working with partners to ensure they can document their work and communicate it in national, regional, and global platforms. Try to do that. Still a lot of work to do there. A lot of work to do, but that was one of the pillars. 3, learning from what works and what does not work and plowing the learning back into design and practice. You know, being able to pick what is working in what we do and then using this learning to reshape how we approach. 4, building strategic connections within the implementing partners and with governments to scale up evidence-based interventions. So this broadly is what we have focused on and continue to focus on. What have been the interventions? It's a lot more in terms of support. Program design support, refining theories of change of projects, doing log frames, evidence grounding, help working with partners to ensure that what we are doing is supported by evidence and not just ad hoc. 2, measurement support, refining measurement systems and processes, supporting baselines, endlines, and other forms of harvesting evidence. 3, documentation and communication support. 4, learning support through convenings like the many we've heard about, 8, peer-to-peer exchanges, that's bilateral, one organization with another, that produced tremendous results, and individual training where bring expertise and put at the disposal of a partner. Then scale up support, adapting tested interventions within the learning initiative from one partner to another. We'll hear more about that. And building connections with governments to scale up evidence-based interventions. Broadly, again, these are the major areas of intervention. So now we are here today for the purpose of looking forward, looking back, so that we can move forward, right? And there are questions that confront us 7 or 8 years down the road. What have we done well that we need to celebrate? What has improved? What have we learned? What could we have done better? What can we improve? And where do we want to go? Now, I hope that by tomorrow we'll have some answers, courtesy of the input of our friends, Kati and Heidi, who did a great job in terms of assessing the progress of this learning initiative. And I hope they will take us through a process of reflection today that we can build on tomorrow to be able to answer that last question. Where do we want to go? Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Iga. That was really refreshing. You've refreshed my mind so well, and I hope to others as well. I will invite any reactions to this presentation. But personally, from my own, what was ringing in my mind is that this learning initiative, of course, it's for all of us. And as organizations, we are mindful that the processes that we change and improve within our institutions are simply a stepping stone to making sure that we are having better results or a better contribution towards the prevention of violence against children. So when we are talking about what have we done well, in this meeting, we shall always remember that we are looking at it in twofold. One, improving the practices within our institutions. Two, creating or contributing to prevention of violence against children. So we will be sharing, and as when you remember against children, the contribution, the projects that you're implementing. So the processes that you improve in your institutions are simply a stepping stone, but what we have to communicate is how is East Africa organized and how is violence reducing because of how we are organized. I just thought that I can emphasize on that so that we can proceed into the day's conversations with that clarity in mind, and that the proceeding discussions will also be looking at the 2 tiers and levels. And I think we requested for some information on both levels. So when you're a moderator, you are lucky. You are the first one to share your comments. So now I invite others to react, if any. If none, then we'll go for our break. Thank you. I'll take on Kati first.
Thank you. That was fun, seeing the history and having assessed the initiative and to see the coherence of what you've done. I said this at the learning convening, but evidence shows that on average to see change in public service, it takes 17 years. And that's in countries that have very developed and functioning systems, health systems, education systems, welfare systems, etc. So as a sneak peek on my opinions about this learning initiative, bravo.
Thank you so much. It was rich and it was really refreshing for some of us who were not there at that time. But I think two things stand out for me. You spoke about the times when you were in a room and it was filled with faces from the global north. It was filled with conversations coming from the global north. And it's just great to see this room having all these brains discussing on how we can move this to the global agenda beyond East Africa. I think that is really encouraging. The second thing which really stood out coming from what Krista and validated from what you presented, that 10 years or so, many years ago, it was not common to see people discuss preventing violence against children as something that should be given priority. But here we are. This is something that we are all focusing on and that we are aspiring to keep working on. I feel there's great progress that needs to be celebrated. So kudos and well done.
Thank you very much. I've been thinking lately about violence against children and what has been done, and putting it into perspective that there's been a lot of focus on women do this and men are the perpetrators. And programming has majorly left out. So my thinking that to reverse the order and make men come to the fore of violence prevention, because they are majorly the perpetrators, but because we keep telling them that you're doing wrong, how can we help them realize that being part of this process, because the children that we are harming are actually, according to our culture, their children. So harming their children doesn't make the world a better place.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, really wonderful work. I was just thinking about this in terms of sustainability, but also going forward, just given the few objectives that I picked towards the end. You call them interventions that IIDC has been involved in. And I was just thinking, if there are few that you can actually pick as products of the work that happened within your funding, and just flag those, as the major impact of this, rather than just the support that could be actually on so many different things that is happening. Usually it tends to get lost that way. But if you have a few programs, there could be 3 on prevention of violence against children that you've taken through for the years that you've been actually working on this or been funded to do. Those are the ones you pick. Keep flagging how you supported them, how you refined them, and how really an initiative like this is something to be replicated elsewhere. So just picking a few that you really flag as your main thing rather than a general support on general things that are happening around Pvac, I think would really be a major plus for you, and I believe there is, because I came in a bit late on the initiative, so I'm just also trying to understand the key angles of it.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I'm now going to Mr. Carol Francis.
So thank you so much for the very nice presentation. Quite a walk down the memory lane. And for me, I think I was really struck by the fact that as far back as 2015, you had already observed the presence of a formal and an informal prevention systems. And I'm kind of curious as to why after all these years, we really don't have a robust conversation around these two systems and how they can be made to speak to each other and complement each other in prevention the way it is. So it's my hope that probably from the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dio, for reminding us how far we have come. I want to reflect at 3 levels. One, this was really important, so much so that most of the organizations that started have stayed on. I'm saying this because there are many networks or consortiums that have been formed around a certain topic, but somehow along the way, people just drop off because they don't see the value. So in this particular context, we've even grown and not dropped, because then we see the value not only in improving practice, but collectively having the power to be able to prioritize agenda in a space where there's so many competing priorities. So kudos to IIDC and to Wellsprings for giving us the space to experiment, the courage to go bold, in the sense that we are national level organizations, yes, there are bigger INGOs in this space, but then we've been able to be the movers and shakers of these topics in our particular countries. So really, really appreciative for that. Secondly, I think for me, when we first interacted with IIDC, we did a learning assessment. So the bigger question was, are you a learning organization, and what does that mean? We all say we are, but I think those reflections are what is getting us here today. One of our values as an organization is continuous learning. You made that alive in the Pvac space, and that has diffused across all programming work that we do. So organizations transforming to be agile, to remain relevant, to invest in solutions that are cost effective, that is something that for me, and I think for every one of us, is of great value. The third aspect for me, it was not structured in the learning initiative, but the power of getting to know each other. There are things we have There are things that we have picked on each other through interactions, soft things that are not structured, and perhaps we need reflections. So with Pvac, with Bantwana, even in the CEO forums, there are things that we have learned, not only at organizational level, but as people, we are different. And I can tell you, among 5 of us who work together as CEOs, women CEOs for that particular matter, things have changed. And some of those we have not documented yet, but there are things that are not structured in learning, but we have picked, we have grown, and there is so much power that comes with that. So kudos to Wellsprings and kudos to IID.
That's a fantastic presentation, Mr. Dio. As I think we are toddlers in this. If you've been going on for about 15 years, I think we're just at the toddler stages as I agree with everything that has been said by the previous speakers, but the word accountability is going round and round in my head. What IIDC has committed to as a learning partner is fantastic, where we present our own data, we utilize it, we improve on it. But to what end do you hold us accountable? This morning we were having a conversation with my colleague Jane about data. Is the commitment just maybe primarily research oriented, where we are giving these fantastic results and you're helping us to document findings from RCTs? But now what we are discovering is randomized controlled trials are just that. They are controlled. When it comes into the real world, these trials that we are doing within East Africa, maybe for example, even within Kenya, in Homa Bay, when I am taking it to an urban informal settlement, it's not working. So do you hold us accountable in terms of translating that practice-based knowledge as well, and appreciating that the RCT worked, but part of learning is the real-life implementation, expecting us to share with the rest of our colleagues the best, the good, the bad, and the ugliest face of implementation and what that means in terms of learning, so that we are not just giving the rosy stories, but we're also saying where the hardships are for the sake of learning. So where does that accountability end when it comes to IIDC and the expectation from us and from each other? Thank you.
We'll take process, the last one, so that we can react to those.
Thank you very much. My reflection has been inspired by Joyce and also by Anne. Andy, was it Carol? Yeah, it's around two things. One, documentation. You've told a very beautiful story and a very beautiful journey, which actually requires us to document it. And then also to document our learnings, because when we share among like-minded, where we know each other, so our story cannot go strong and create that big impact and bring in more partners to support this cause. Two, around accountability. I really want to thank IIDC. One of those who started with raising voices, and it's true, a lot of work was on awareness creation. And of course, that was the need then, because violence against children, nobody would talk about it. You know, it was not easy to create a breakthrough. There were organizations of which I saw faces here. I saw Dale, I saw Susan, who were really breaking through in those conversations. Topher here. But we were really creating awareness, and this is timely. When Raising Voices did the RCT, it was, one of those organizations start to think. But with this IIDC, when you have a sounding board, when you have like-minded colleagues coming to think about this issue, when you have that sharing and togetherness where people are starting to think about the issue, you get the strength to move forward and make your program even stronger. So at Raising Voices, it was our aspects to document it, because if we don't document it, then questions will come. Where is the evidence? So I just wanted to bring that evidence that actually this works, this is inspiring, we have learned, and we continue learning, and we are moving forward. Thank you.
Get the final reaction or response to those, then we'll see how to move.
Thank you all very much. Very, very inspiring reflections. I can't reiterate all of them. I think many of them are for us really to think about as a collective, as a team. And thank you for the very kind feedback about this journey. Kati, 17 years it takes. That is sobering. Yeah, because sometimes we can be unrealistic. I like that, check. You say, you want to change the world in 3 years? Probably not possible. So it's true. Change takes time. But I think then we should not sit on our laurels and say, 17 years. We have time. Some of us have been at this work for, Timothy, how many years? 17 years as a collaborative, as a learning community, we've gone about 8. We'll soon be there at 17. But it's good to know. I think the key message is please be realistic. Yeah. Bringing men to the fore of VAC programming. I saw Timothy shifting a bit when they said men are the... No, but I think, of course, out there you will have a debate because it depends on what type of abuse. When I'm training on safeguarding, wearing a different hat, I use the example of physical violence. All the VAC studies done in all the 3 countries in East Africa demonstrated that I think physical violence is the most widespread, next to emotional violence. Physical violence is one of the biggest forms of violence that children experience. Sexual violence comes after it in terms of prevalence. And the children were asked who are the major perpetrators of physical violence. The women. Of course, because it's linked to discipline, and in our gendered roles, women have been assigned responsibility for maintaining discipline, while as the men, we chill a bit and make provisions, and then roast the women for when children misbehave. They are under pressure. But anyway, it is ultimately about power. Abuse is about power. Even women, when they have the power, I use that example to show, that when children are very young, they are very much beaten. When between very young, not beaten. Between 7 to 13, it is at the peak. You know who is beating. After 14, 15 to 18, it reduces. And some people think that the children are becoming more behaved. No. It's the power that is shifting. Because the children are growing bigger, older, and the power has started to shift. And so the mothers can no longer, but it's all about power. But true, we recognize that generally society is skewed in favor of women. By virtue of having more power, we end up abusing it most. So focus on male engagement. This is another area in which we are working as IIDC with another group of partners. The issue of male engagement in child caregiving and is a growing area of interest and programming. I think that is a very valid observation. How do we bring men in this work that is recognized and growing? It's a growth area. Why are we not having a robust conversation about formal and informal child protection systems? I think I can't answer that. That is a question back to us. I know UNICEF is still focused on this work, on child protection systems. I think it has been overtaken a bit by the recognition that, actually it's a conceptual challenge around how do we define the boundaries in these systems and the focus on the broader. When you look at, for instance, at issues of norms now, that takes us at more systemic level than just a focus on one system. But I think it's a valid and necessary conversation that we probably need to pick up more. It's probably a theme for another convening. Thank you, Beatrice, for highlighting the value of innovativeness and also pointing out that people in this room have become the movers and shakers on this topic in their respective countries, which is true, and that was one of the aspirations. The need for agility cannot be overemphasized, and the power of connectivity. I have a son, he calls it Kone. These young people, he say, Daddy, you have Kone. I said, what do you mean? I have connections. So the power of connectivity and this relationship planning and growing cannot be overemphasized. The issue of accountability in terms of what's happening in the real world, thank you very much, because yes, you said the RCT is an RCT, it's controlled, but we are accountable for what is happening in the real world. And I think somebody was raising that. Is Pvac reducing in our communities? We have success stories. We have tested interventions. The question for people out there, policymakers, ordinary folks, is Pvac reducing in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Shinyanga, in Western Uganda? Is Pvac reducing? That is the challenge that we have to all deal with. Yeah, of course, documenting our story and journey, yeah, that's very true. And maybe we are starting on that now, because we focus so much on the work in the past, and I hope that what Kati will share will provide a foundation for us to further document our journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tiger. I think there's an intention to clap. Maybe let's do that. So we'll continue to discuss these emerging issues in the breaks, because now time is not on our side. I don't like to say that when I'm moderating sessions, but sorry about that. Yeah, we are going to have a 20 minutes break, have a cup of tea, and then we come back and we hear from Kati about the findings from the assessment that was recently done. Before we go, I just want to let you know that among the virtual participants, Noella Lumbara from Children's Investment Fund Foundation has joined. They were clear that they were going to join at 11 o'clock. So when we have our break, we will have them for the next session together with Abby. Let's have our break in the 20 minutes so that we save time for those who are watching online. So virtual participants, please have a cup of tea for 20 minutes. We'll represent you here in this room as well with a cup of tea, and we'll continue our conversations at 11:25. I thank you very much. So we'll talk to you later.
took a 10-person or 15 or 20-person team. This was a lot of work. So thank you to everybody in the room, too, for helping us. And Heidi, I think there's some tech problems, so you might need to put comments in the chat. And Samali is going to watch that chat and signal to me so we can take a pause. All right, so I've already heard, I think, let's have an honest vote here. Who was able to read any portion of the report? You can put your hand up. You were sent the report, the assessment. We know it's long, and you know from the last time I spoke to you that the average attention span is 8.2 seconds now. So it's a very long report. It's very dense, as I said. So we'll be going over some of the major findings today so that we can all have constructive conversation in the afternoon about direction. Also, I've already heard from a few people about the case studies and that we used in the report. Is there any way you can recognize our organization more? Could you put in this example and that example? That's why we're doing this work together today, so that we can refine what's in there. So I will begin. So this is what IIDC hired Heidi and I to do in the contract to assess. We were going to evaluate, and then we decided not to use the word evaluate, but rather assess where we are. These are the broad objectives. Just think about the design of the initiative and if it was effective. To review the different types of mechanisms and modalities that were used in achieving the outcomes. To extract and document those outcomes and learning and impact, and then also to recommend improvements in design. So those were the 4 things that we set out to do. I'm going to be taking some pauses with different sections of this. We okay? Oh, okay. Closer, okay. Here we go. Oh, that's good. My glasses never work, so is that better? Okay. So those were the 4 objectives of this work. So why is it so hard to know that we're making a difference? And it really is very, very difficult. Evaluators are always scratching their heads saying, we're not sure we can show this, we don't know how, it's difficult to measure. And some of the reasons are because we're navigating so many different factors that are influencing change. Your governments change, the climate changes, there's just change happening all the time in different ways, structurally and in micro ways, right? So it's very difficult to measure that because it's like this. It's crazy. Oops. Tech. Oh, there. Secondly, we're embracing challenges in all of our settings. And many of you work in communities around East Africa, so all those settings are different. We're on relationships. We've heard a lot about how important people are in the relationships and how that's sort of critical to the success of this initiative. We're thinking about we're experiencing climate change, and we're experiencing conflict at low and high levels in different places and at different levels. And we're also trying to figure out what is going on in this complex system. So these are the reasons why it's so hard. Midway, I think after I spoke to Bantwana, and we spoke to Bantwana and TPO, Deo and Moses, we checked in with them, and Deo said, how are you feeling? And I said, you know that emoji with the crazy eyes? I said, that's how I feel right now. And we had only just begun because it's so complicated and it's so overwhelming. And we were just looking at what you've done, so I can imagine the overwhelm you felt. So if your work focuses on educating, empowering, inspiring, supporting, do we have control over this tech issue? Encouraging or influencing people, then simplistic and quantitative approaches can't tell the story of what makes a difference and why that work, is changing things. And that's our challenge, and that's why it's so hard. to see the difference that we're making. I'm going to refer a little bit to Inspire. These are the global guidelines that we use that come from 10 big global north organizations. Those are the strategies underneath. I love the photo on the cover of the participants manual, because for me this really, I don't know if Nell knew what she was doing when she did this, but for me it really reflects Inspire. It's not so linear, is it? It's going in lots of different directions. You've got this image of this person's head and all these crazy things coming out of the head. So I'm not sure she intended that, but I think it's very fitting. So we're working in complexity. If you flip over your folder and look at the other side, you've got a mind and a head. You flip on the back side, and you've got those going out in different directions. So it's really a perfect image for what we're dealing with when we talk about complexity. Okay, so just to frame this talk, there's a lot of new thinking going on. It's taken years, as Deo pointed out, for people to come to terms with this and accept it and make it official and say it's okay to do things this way. And it's coming now from governments like Australia. It's coming out of universities like the University of Birmingham, Manchester rather. People are stamping approval. The old thinking is that we would prove what works, and the new thinking is that we're continually improving. That's very, very different, right? The old thinking is we were accountable for performance, and the new thinking is we have accountability for learning. The old way of thinking was that we manage public services. We go in and we manage the services in the government and those people, and now rather we govern those public services. There's a big difference between managing and governing. And then finally, the old thinking was top-down, command and control, and the new thinking is shape and lead complex change. So you can see in the new thinking, you've been doing this, right? These are all the things that you've been doing. So I just wanted to begin the whole assessment with that positive framing. And this is how we're thinking now about public service design, development, and delivery. So you're at the forefront, and I've said this many times. So what did we do as assessors? I'll call it, it sounds like a tax man, but we came in and assessed what you were doing. We looked at all the different pieces, we talked to people, and then we harvested information. And we're going to explain that process, and then we'll take a little pause to make sure everyone understands it. So in terms of the design, when Deo asked us to do this, we really had to think about, how are we going to do this? Because, as I said, it's really difficult to look at an initiative that's 10 years old, in 3 countries with 7 different NGOs, and try and assess that change. And we thought about, well, the common way to do it is this attribution way, where you look at the what you do, and did it create an outcome or impact? That's old thinking, right? Attribution. They still do that when they do RCTs and these impact evaluations that are required to get into Inspire strategies. They still want to see attribution. But the thing is that's a very closed system. You do something and then you have an outcome. You know what's going on with the... Okay. The second way to think about this in terms of design is contribution. And I think John Hakielimu and I were just talking about this. And that's with what you do. It'd be nice if we could get the visuals. That's okay. Oh. Hello, tech. It's just the visuals are helpful to understand this, right? So this was just all of our pre-thinking before we even started the work. How do we design how we're going to assess? we go. Thank you. So the second way, you can attribute something, but it's a closed system, right? It's very linear, and it's very like something happens, you do something, an intervention, and then you look at the outcomes. In a contribution approach, what you do has lots of different things are happening, right? Outside of the control of the main circle of what you intended to do. And therefore, you also have outcomes and impact. So it's not like you're not going in the same direction, but it's a very open system. And so that, of course, is what you've been doing. A lot of complicated work, right? Working in complexity. There is, by the way, a whole school of complexity science now. It's about systems and organizing. So you've been working in this complex open system. So that's why we framed the design of the work that we did for you to assess around the contributions approach, all right? So we set out to assess learning, uptake, use, and impact. Those are three very different things. One is just getting it, receiving it, giving it, right? Action verbs. One is actually, the next is actually using it, and then the third is actually using it to create sustainable change. So very different levels. And we did this in basically 6 steps. And anyone can do this. You can do it as an evaluator or an assessor. You can do this as an organization. You can do this as an initiative. You basically need to understand the problem that needs to be addressed in the system in which it sits, which is a big task. And then secondly, you develop a theory of change, which all of you did over the years, and how projects or programs aim to create change. It's all theoretical. And then you assemble all the data and evidence, and then you assess any gaps in the evidence. You seek out additional evidence, because this is all evidence-based, and then you create a contribution story. So this is what we did. And I am really pushing that IIDC takes this approach and embeds it in all of the projects moving forward. So everyone talks about context. I once did a little experiment and I pulled about 10 published articles by the CDC and by academics. And sometimes they have little abstracts or little reviews of the study. And all of them said, but context matters. We did this study, but context needs to be looked at. We feel this intervention works, however, context needs to be documented. Everyone talks about context and no one is doing it, right? Because it's super complicated. So you are working in complex systems, and that means there's lots of moving parts going on, and the outcomes and impacts are very unpredictable. So there are the 3 countries, the time, the place, the people, the culture, the institution, the setting, all make a huge difference, whether things are achieved or not, and whether an initiative has made a difference. Can you imagine trying to put numbers on time and place and people and culture and institution and setting? They're not metrics. It's very hard to quantify them, right? But without those things, you're never going to see change. And that's sort of the theme of this and why we took a qualitative contributions approach. And of course, you've got the unpredictability of things like COVID, which really changed everything in the way that we deliver services, did our interventions, and thought about the partnership. So whether you're supporting people to move on in their lives, implementing new policy initiatives, providing training, or spreading good practice, the evidence, and this is published, the evidence shows that the most effective approaches are those that are tailored to the specific context in which work is done. We know this, but it's not being done. You are doing it. You are all very context aware. So how did we look at the context? When Heidi and I started this work, we came to all of your offices. We spent a day and a half with each of you, which now in retrospect, John says was not long enough. We should have spent more time, but that's what we had. And we used this model called the individual, social, and material model, and we asked you to tell us about your context. We acknowledged that we are not East African and that we needed educating about everything in your context. So you started at the individual level, and this was really important because people gave personal feelings and revealed personal issues about their work and how they feel about it. And then we moved to the social level, of opinion leaders and norms and roles and identities and networks and relationships, which are so critical again. And then we move to this outer level, the material level, which is really important. Do you have the infrastructure? Is there a road to the community that you're going through during the rainy season? Time and resources. Are clinics open at the right time for people to access them? So all of these issues are really, really important. So we did a big mapping of this with each of the organizations, and we understood context. Another thing we needed to do in our design was understand your theories of change. Note the difference. On the left, we have Women Fund Tanzania and their theory of change, which has 5 very simple steps and a paragraph to explain it. And note on the right side, Botswana's theory of change, which is extremely involved with different levels and different measures and different indicators. So we had to work with a whole lot of different kinds of theories of change, and we are not recommending that there is a common theory of change. The beauty of IIDC's learning initiative was working with what partners were presenting, the agility to work and be with partners as they were moving along in their journey. So we took these approaches and theories of change, and partners presented them to us. So we heard from them. So the first part of the day was just listening to partners. This is all about how we did our process. And then what we did was we took those theories of change and we deconstructed them. And we did a historical series of questions. Okay, so what did you put into this project? What were the activities and outputs? Who was engaged? How did they feel about that? And the one about feeling is not a typical evaluation question. How do you feel about something? But it's so important, right? If your government doesn't feel that this is a good initiative and pushes back, that is critical in your success, right? So feelings, people's attitudes are really important. Their knowledge, their attitude and skills is about awareness. That just means that there is an awareness. It doesn't mean anything's changed. It just means an awareness. You know, people do pre and post tests after a webinar or a workshop, and they say, done. We've changed people's minds. That's just awareness raising. The real one is the behavior and practice change. So we looked at that, and then we looked at the capacities and learning are improved as the final impact. So with every organization, we went through this chain, and anyone that was involved knows it was tiring. And we kept on asking for questions, and we kept on asking for documentation. So it was very participatory, all of our work. We worked with people and listened as much as we could. And we asked questions. We asked a lot of questions. We harvested outcomes. We literally said, someone would say, oh yeah, a minister came to see the schools in Uganda, and we took them around. I said, give me proof. And I remember at Raising Voices, they looked at me and they said, well, we have an email. I said, great, give me the email. That is evidence, right? That is not typical in evaluations or assessments, but that is evidence that you have that the minister came. Haki Elimu had emails as well. So we used any kind of evidence that we could to harvest outcomes. We looked at over 100 documents across the organizations. We did over 70 hours of interviewing to come to the conclusions that we came to, and we did a lot of group work. As I said, it was all fairly participatory. We assessed 2 things. Did you build capacities? Because that's what Wellspring had funded for the first tranche. And were you able to document change and evidenced by outcomes and impact? And all of that was to determine the contribution of the learning initiative. So we did that by asking these questions. What do you do? What do you do? Who do you do it with? How did they feel? What did they learn and gain? What did they do differently? And what difference does this make? These are very simple questions, but with complicated answers, right? Super simple. The beauty is that they're simple, right? And they can guide you. And if you use this when you start your interventions, then you can track your context, you can define success, you can agree on the risks and assumptions, you can think about your progress, you can change things when things aren't progressing, right? You can change criteria, you can track, and then you can tell the change story. So at any point, if the donor, a donor, says to you, why isn't it working? We funded this intervention, why isn't it working? You can say, we can tell you why. Because this changed and that changed, and we had pushback from the government, and you have your answers right there all the time. So this is a really beautiful way to track. And it gave us a way to assess what you did. Heidi's adding.
Heidi's adding that they also asked what role did IIDC play when going through the chain?
Thank you, Heidi. So, yeah, the whole point was to understand what you did and how IIDC helped you do that, right? That's IIDC's contribution to the Learning Initiative. IIDC didn't come in and ask us to look at you as an individual organization. They wanted to see how the Learning Initiative made it possible for you to be a learning organization, right? That was the contribution. So I'm just going to pause there so that we don't get too exhausted. Are there any questions or thoughts on the assessment approach? Does it make sense? It's hard, you know. Evaluators will like scratch their head. If you brought in a typical evaluator to look at this, they would have said, "Not sure we got evidence here." Whereas we were saying, "Wow, look at all this evidence," right? It's not just us coming in and being progressive or liberal or open-minded. We're both researchers. We've both done this work in the field for a long time. This is an approach now. This is a new way of thinking, and you've been doing it. So it is valid, and we need to get the word out about it and how it works. Unpredictable patterns and outcomes. So what works in one place, for example, an RCT done by ICS with Kenya and Tanzania, what worked in Tanzania did not work in Kenya. And yet the program was flourishing in Kenya, right? That's an unpredictable pattern. That pattern by a normal scientist would be, not good, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with the researchers or the method. But it's unpredictable. You can't really control that. So what were the interactions between people in place? Those are the questions that were raised. Interventions and programs and approaches often affect one another. Now, many of you have several different funders. There was the Wellspring funding, the Oak Foundation funding, the Hilton funding, the Lego funding, et cetera. And all these programs were interacting. So for us to just say it was IIDC's contribution was really tricky. Right? It could have been anyone's contribution. It could have been your former director's contribution and not the current director. We just don't know, right? So where were the synergies and where were the challenges and how was that steered? So, no initiative or organization is working. There's always many things going on. The previous policies, ways of working, structures and processes continue to affect the system. Past policies can what's happening in Tanzania. In Tanzania, during COVID, there was a change of government, I think. Policies changed radically. I think there's been changes of government in many countries, maybe not Uganda, but whoops. So those kinds of changes, either political or institutional or whatever, are, create disruptions in what we're doing, right? We can change course altogether. You know this. So what disruptions happen and how did they affect outcomes? Very difficult to capture unless you talk to people and say what happened during your project that changed the course. And then finally, feedback loops. Information and knowledge can have a huge effect on a system. So evaluation and data are the main loops for learning and improvement, but they are not the only ones. So what are the stories about the people in the place, the successes and failures, and how did they affect how people think and act? So think about it. Would a normal evaluation capture all this? Probably not, unless it was super, super qualitative. So we tried to, but every time you said that something happened, we'd say, give us evidence. So I'm now going to go into findings and results, all of which are in the reports. I'll try and move through it quickly so we don't belabor it too much. But the first one was about that design that we used, or that you used, rather, right? The approach, the design of the Learning Initiative. It's a South-South model. There is a group of people that came out in the late 80s calling doing development differently. And they were some Harvard professors, I think, that decided that we should start doing things differently than the typical North-South model. It was a lot of rhetoric, and they wrote a lot about it, but they didn't. There were not tons of examples of it. IIDC is an example of that beautiful South-South model. It's unusual still, unfortunately, but it works, and you've proven that it works, and it's because of your collaboration. I think it was Deo that said, a collective intelligence, all of us is superior to individual efforts, one of us. The second bit of appropriateness of design is the collaborative learning that went on. You know this, you've talked about it, and that's recognizing that problems are really complex and messy and interdependent, and there's no way that a single intervention or a single organization can solve those problems. Many of you got up and talked about the friendships you made, but it's more than friendships, right? You learned at those learning convenings. You really learned about new ways of doing things. And then thirdly, in terms of appropriateness of design, we have influencing through knowledge brokering. So acknowledging that you need to communicate, you need to influence and convene systems and support system processes and partnership with a focus on learning. So that's the first thing about design. You know, was the design appropriate? We think the design was really appropriate. Any comments on design? Or should I just feel like you're going to get tired of my voice? Okay. All right, so findings and results. The second was implementation modalities, how IIDC did this work with you, and did it achieve outcomes? So we categorized these top 5 things. One was that there was accessible technical support. Now, under normal programming, you need to hire a consultant. They come in for a short period of time, and then they fly out, and you get your tech support, and they're like, "Good luck. You know, let us know how it goes." With IIDC, it was continuous. You had a menu to choose from. It was face-to-face or online, and it was there was continuity to it. So that was really an important part of the modality that made this project, this initiative, very different. Another modality and mechanism was improved data management, which has been huge, I think, and important and already recognized earlier today. That you know, learning to use data and flexibly and responsively to figure out what works, how, when, where, and for whom. We have a data-rich environment now going on all around. Donors want it, everybody wants it, and you have that data and you're using it well. So that's the second one. The third is the peer-to-peer alliances. Again, many of you have talked about it and talked about it with us, about how much you learned by meeting each other at the convenings, by coming to meetings like this, to talking to each other. And those were friendships, those were professional communications, those were really solutions to violence prevention. And IIDC definitively concentrated on people and relationships, which again is not a typical thing that's considered important in VAC prevention. When you think about Inspire, they don't talk a lot about people and relationships. They talk about results. They do not talk about people and relationships, but that is so critical to the success. And the Learning Initiative nurtured that. The fourth one are the convenings, which everybody was wild about and loved, and really helped for exchange and learning. And there's a lot of information to report about that, about having the right information and feedback and approaches developed and rolled out, and testing those assumptions with each other, going back home and taking an idea and trying it out, and then calling your partner and asking about it. That was those convenings were extremely rich, and having participated in one, I was deeply impressed by the critiquing that went on as we reviewed parenting projects. So learning fast, basically, although annually, you did learn fast and you made changes and you did corrective things. So that's really a huge, important and adequate way of delivering. And then finally, effective engagement and partnerships. This is different than peer-to-peer alliances. This is engaging with your communities, which you all did. You know, when the parents said they needed village savings and loans, you started those programs in various among various partners. You listened, and IIDC understood that you needed to work within that system, and that many perspectives are important to understand. You need everyone's perspective, from the community and the children all the way up to the government and people at WHO. So, you know, systems operate on different levels, and I think that in many ways the initiative got through to those levels. There could be more done at the global level, and there could be a lot more done at the local level, as well as you did, because that's where the change is going to happen for children, right? But on your way, and it's super impressive. So engagement is engaging in partnerships with people, with communities. Very important, all these mechanisms. Okay, the third one, and that was that second tranche that came from Wellspring, was like, okay, great, you've built your capacities, you're engaging, you're doing these things, but are you documenting it? And we looked at documentation in terms of increased awareness and capacity. And we think that the focus on drivers of violence and social norms, which was requested in 2015 that we need to do that your initiative, by focusing on that, really raised awareness, and that at so many levels. So the initiative definitely enhanced, I think, everybody's ability, and we've already had testimony to that today, about their capacity for action. Secondly, the monitoring and evaluation enhancements were remarkable and really important. This is something the field struggles with all over the world. I'm doing a review in China right now of all of the interventions, and we have found, I think, of 75 interventions, about 3 of them have been evaluated. It's still a problem. No one's evaluating. Your M&E enhancements have been fantastic, and you know, I think partners struggled and continue to struggle with less formally collected data, which we know is important. Sometimes it's disorganized, and that's the case for all organizations. This is not a negative comment. It's just disorganized across different areas, and it's patchy. Sometimes it's really well organized. There's a great baseline and an end line, and then in between it's not so clear. But basically, efforts to improve measurement are ongoing and have been really strong. And we especially heard this from groups like Pvac, who were just so excited to get the M&E. You know, they knew that they were lacking, and then they really picked it up. But I think everybody benefited. Social norms was another one of documentation of learning and impact. That was huge. I think we all agree that understanding social norms, how to identify social norms. You know, violence is often invisible, and you cannot change a norm unless it's visible. So this was important. I took a course on social norms and was confused for half of the course because it's hard. Once they start talking about it technically, it's really difficult information, like a reference group and this, and the difference between a custom and a tradition and a norm, and you're like, what? You know, it's really confusing. I heard a lot of expertise coming out of many, many different organizations on what is a social norm, how do you identify it, how do you diagnose, and how do you shift it. And we have seen some shifts happening, and we saw those shifts happening at a very personal level among staff members in their communities, as well as, I think, institutional shifts at the government level. So congratulations on the work of social norms. Documentation, the sharing of knowledge through a lot of different learning platforms has been another really important type of contribution that IIDC has made with those peer-to-peer alliances, and also to try and leverage change. So there's a whole list, which may be incomplete, we'll go over that in the report, about the policies and guidelines that you contributed to and that you have helped your governments institute. So that documentation is important, and as Deo said, we're still working on that. And then refining your community models. That's been, many of you were doing this work anyhow. It's not like IIDC came in and helped you do community-based work. You were doing fabulous work before, but I think that it's all much, much better because of the contribution of the initiative. And partners understand that people are best placed to know what they need. So I think the listening to communities improved, rather than just doing something and doing an intervention and getting a funder to tell you to do something. You started listening and working with, rather than you started working with the communities, and that became very productive and empowering for the communities and for the outcomes. Okay, we're on the last thing that you asked about, and that was value-added improvements. This one I'm going to go through kind of quickly, but the first, and these are listed in the book. Yeah. We have a question? Oh, okay, good.
Thank you. I wanted you to give more insights on under improved data management. what are your insights in terms of utilization of data that was collected, but also more specifically in terms of feedback to the communities where we are collecting this data?
Okay, so that's a specific question, and I could get out the report and try and explain that to you. Heidi, come in if you want. But we saw, first of all, we saw improvements of the way people understood evaluation. So, for instance, Pvac was beginning at a fairly rudimentary stage of evaluation at the beginning, and now is it really experienced, and your M&E person is on fire with measurement now. So we saw those improvements as a result of the menu that you could choose from on what you needed. We saw the engagement of, like with the Good Schools work, with and this is very non-conventional, and I think sometimes will be questioned, but it's a beautiful model of using community members. I think Haki Elimu does this as well with the parents and teachers, and I think Botswana does it as well. Many of you do it, where you're using the community to gather data and evaluate, and that is extremely powerful. You know, you don't need PhDs to do monitoring and evaluation and get feedback loops. So I think there's several examples among the organizations of how communities were involved. The feedback loop to the communities, I think, possibly could be improved, but we can talk about that during the validation in the afternoon. About, like, do communities understand what they're doing? I think they do, but I think they could probably hear more, and that in turn is going to empower them and make those interventions stronger. Is that okay? So for value-add improvements, the first was capacity building. That's the big one, right? And that was what you set out to do initially in 2015 and forward. In terms of training, we think that the continuity in training could be improved in a sense that there's a lot of specialists at IIDC, and so when you ask for training, you're given a person depending on what the specialty is. We're suggesting, this is open, that maybe there's one person at IIDC that is assigned so that you can have a deeper relationship with that person, and that person then contacts people at IIDC, but that you're just contacting one person. It might work, it may not. Anything that we suggest is open. I think, and I think Heidi agrees, that we might want to have some common indicators across all of our projects. We don't necessarily want to have all the same ones, that doesn't work, but a couple common ones to show that we are a collective force in East Africa, right? And we have really good data collectively, not alone. I think that's really important. And that's the big bang for the region. We are suggesting budget analyses and costing as the next step for scaling and change. I was so happy to hear from Beatrice this morning that they are doing that at ICS Kenya. They're doing their first budget analysis and cost effectiveness analysis of the gender transformation project, the parenting project. That's excellent. I think there's only been one other costing exercise done by Raising Voices many years ago. You have to cost out your interventions or you're never going to get government to shift those budgets. You have to tell them what is required, and that requires costing and cost effectiveness studies. So that's great to see that that's beginning. And then organization-wide training. So there's this idea that people would come to the Learning Collaborative and it would trickle down to other people, but we want to see it trickle across, right? So how do you do that? Maybe invite more different people to the learning convenings, change it around, do trainings where everybody's invited. There's got to be more cross-staff learning because capacity building seems to be focused on the M&E person or the programming person. In terms of capacity building for mentoring, we really believe that there's capacity within and among you to start mentoring other organizations. So the dependency can grow off of and from IIDC and what you've learned. One of the new stages that you could think about moving into is you providing the technical assistance based on your experience. And that could happen in a variety of ways through cascading, et cetera. So I think that there's there's experts among you now. And believe me, you're running in to do studies and evaluate what you've been doing. I think that there are real experts among these organizations, and I think that you should probably be using that expertise more actively. The next area is innovation and adaptive programming with robust measures. You've talked about innovation. That was one of the ideas in 2015. Oh, Heidi's got additions.
Heidi is also contributing or supplementing to the question on the data use, and she says that in terms of data collection by partners, what was impressive is how IIDC enabled program implementers to define indicators by identifying how they would know changes taking place and what data could reasonably be collected.
You got some nods in the room from that, Heidi. Thank you. Right, so again, that was coming to you and using your information to create a system of change and learning, right? Not IID assuming that they knew what to do and telling you what to do, or the donor assuming what they needed you to show them and you having to follow them. It was you driving the process. Very, very important modality. So in terms of innovation, adaptive programming, we talked about in 2015, they said, we need more innovation. Well, you've done it, folks. You've definitely done it. You did a lot of innovation. You need to keep pushing for this. And you need to not be fearful of it. And you need to say, it doesn't matter if the WHO says we're not doing the right thing. You need to prove why you are doing the right thing. You need to align to those global strategies and show them that you're doing it the East African way, that you are adapting and adjusting, and you're adapting your management as well as your program. So we really think that that's important, and investing seed funding to do that, to do these different non-traditional ways of programming. We think that you need to continue to strengthen and utilize your monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Using the data is very different than capturing the data. So one thing is to capture it and show change, and that's it, to create change, more change. That's really important. Right now, it's all focused on the M&E people, because none of us really like, in general, people don't like evaluation because it means numbers, or because it's complicated. It's not complicated, and it doesn't just mean numbers. I think everybody needs to understand better the MEL findings, and we both think that. And finally, adapting program design and continue to document how the change happens. So if you do adaptations, you have to document it so that you've got the evidence of why something happened, where it happened, when it happened, and who was involved. So that's going to be important in terms of this innovation, which needs to continue, because no one's doing innovative things. They're following the recipe. Results in terms of knowledge management, dissemination, and global South brokering. This is a big section. In terms of management, we think improving the management information systems for knowledge is going to be important. So we got a lot of all these 100 documents. Remember, we were dealing with what's the title of this, what year did it come out, who authored it, how does it tell us where we're going. It's really important that your documents are well managed. I think Raising Voices has done some initial work on that, trying to create an internal knowledge management system. All of the partners need to do that. And that will be really critical as you move forward to prove that you have the historical evidence to show the pathway. And we talked about that earlier. So second is increasing the capacity in program managers to access and utilize the program data. So this is about what I talked about before. Everyone needs to be able to use the data, not just the M&E person or not just the executive director. Everyone needs to understand it because everyone's got great ideas. And this is the ethos of the learning, right, is that it's a collaborative, participatory thing. So right now it tends to be focused on certain people doing certain things, and that's got to kind of spread more widely. In terms of training, I think you need to compile your knowledge more strategically with Inspire. The way to penetrate the corridors of power with your knowledge and your information is to align with them, but tell a different story. And you're poised. You're very well poised to do that. You could do that with the report alone. But that's important in order to break out of your system here, your closed system within East Africa. In terms of training, capacity building to strengthen access, understand, and use the national data sets. This is Heidi was really emphasizing, and that is that you're creating change locally and maybe within your governments, but you need to compare it to the national data and what it says to show what your change means vis-a-vis the national data. And you're not doing that right now. You're doing your projects, you're making progress, but you really need to get into that disaggregated data at the national and subnational levels. That's going to make your narrative about change so powerful, right? And you haven't done that yet, so that's really important. That data is publicly available as well. That's DHS data, that's global Pvac data, that's intervention data that the academics are doing in and abroad. You need training in how to do that. I think we think you need better all-around access to the program data. We've talked about that, so it can be used. That's linked to that above the capacities, right? Everyone needs to be able to use the data, not just capture it. We talked a lot at the learning using Inspire indicators and aligning, right? Not all of them, but some of them. We've started the work on that at the convening, and I think that should be continued. And that is so that you can bring your voice into the global narrative, but bring the local voice into the global narrative. And then finally, we feel that you could accelerate documentation, but curated for different stakeholders. So right now you're doing stories of significant change, you're doing publications, you're beginning to do publications, you have beautiful scientific reports, but they're not really curated for specific people. And that's the new way that knowledge information is going. You want something for the government, something for the activists, something for the children, something, for all of the different stakeholders. And if you take one report and create 5 products from it, you're going to create a massive amount of change. It would be like a wave of change rather than just one of those stakeholders. Another part of this knowledge management, dissemination, and global South brokering is advocacy. So we think that there's got to be more learning initiative representation in national and regional bodies and on global platforms for increased exposure and use of the work. So lots of great training manuals, many very good how-to manuals documented by you, but no one's using them except maybe you and your organization. And you've made those manuals, but they're not being used. This is about the usability of what you've collected. That's a weak point, right? We've got to get that out so people can see and begin to use it and adapt it for their own settings. We've talked about unlocking the initiative's knowledge and collaboration with others, and we've talked about publications. We had the Right Shop, and we're beginning to do some publications. We've chosen 4 of 13 draft manuscripts that we're going to start working on now. It does not mean that if your group is in the total number of manuscripts that you won't be included. We're just doing it in waves so that we can manage it, but that's going to be important as well. And then the Global South model, I've said this before and we can talk about it when we think about direction, but I think that you have the power, the clout, the evidence, and the know-how to become knowledge brokers for East Africa. I think that the governments and the partners should come together. I think that you should be gatekeepers so that if someone that looks like me with glasses and has a professor status comes down and says, I'd love to do an RCT here, that they would need to go to you and through you in order to do that. They would need to sit and listen to you. They would need to listen to the practice and look at your evidence. And I can guarantee that if you can get them to the table as official knowledge brokers of East Africa, that they would have to change the way that they do their research, which would benefit everybody, including children. So this for me is a little bit of a dream that you would become those brokers. And then finally, resource mobilization. Samali talked about Wellspring leaving and Wellspring as mama. For me, it sounded a little bit like a eulogy, and that you were saying goodbye, and there was a tone of little bit of sadness and maybe as you're thinking about your budgets, despair, because Wellspring has been so incredibly generous and consistent with the funding. I think it's a new beginning, and as many people said, you're very well poised now to be on your own. So you need to use your products and get this out there and bring the new funders on. You're doing something very radical, and it's not just one NGO that's doing it, it's many NGOs that are doing it through a Southern Technical Assistance Group, IIDC. So this is something that can be celebrated and also used for funding purposes. You need to diversify, obviously, now that Wellspring is leaving, eventually the pool of funding sources to uplift this model into a solid regional learning arena for the region and for the world. You could become an example to other regional areas, regional bodies around the world as well, of how this is done. You've got the history, it's all there, people. You could stop your documentation now and prove this, but don't. I think the original group was Wellspring funded people. I think that criteria we both, Heidi and I both feel that the criteria needs to be reviewed, and people who are ready and willing to come in need to come in and should be included, so more inclusive within the realm of management. And then building more sustainability and working with other child protection actors like UNICEF, et cetera. I know you have a little bit, you've touched on them, but these are your knowledge brokers, they're power brokers, right? You gotta get, as knowledge, you have power, so you need to sit next to the power brokers much more closely and work with them to advocate for budget shifts and allocations. They're the ones that can change government, but they can't do it without you because you've got the evidence. So those were the 4 areas that we were asked to look at by the IIDC on their contributions. We could do questions now, but I think we're going to be doing that a lot through the validation. But I don't know if we want to raise any questions now. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize. Oh, yep.
Thank you, and it's really not a question. It's more, it's a comment, and especially with regard to the approach that you used. I thought it's refreshing, actually, because you kind of moved away from the conventional way that when you started, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be this, you know. Yeah, but I was really glad to listen and see that the approach was, to use the other word that you used, very contextual. So it fitted very well, and I think it captures quite a lot that the convention wouldn't, and like you said, simple things like emails and then moving away from attribution to contribution, I also think is a fundamental shift in the way we see assessments and learning. So I just wanted to say that I think it's quite a refreshing approach to this assessment.
Thank you. The challenge now will be to take it on for yourselves, because everything that we did, we've got tools, and you can do this yourselves. So that will be, I'm happy to hear that, though.
Thank you very much for the findings and the report. I love the way it has evolved. Having participated in the assessment process as one of the respondents, my reflection listening to you would be, if I'd listened or gotten Deo's presentation, I would give you different answers. Yeah. All right, what I'm trying to mean is when I get the background of the learning initiative from Dell from 2015, what it was set out to do and what they really wanted to achieve,
And going through the process of the assessment, that is a person. I would think I would have maybe a different way of approaching my responses, looking at the East African Learning Initiative led by IIDC and an IIDC Learning Initiative. You get my point? Yeah, so I think that would give me a very different perspective, personal listening, because I see the findings, and then when I reflect with there was presentation, and I'm like, oh, okay. But it all fits into what we all wanted to get. That's why I'm like, I mean, the findings are really very beneficial for us, but I think the background helps us more to appreciate the findings in that context. So I think it was also good that they will give us that.
And we did indeed struggle with that as we were doing the assessment, right? Because it's an innovative way of doing an assessment. So we were thinking, wait a minute, are we trying to understand what Botswana did to create change, or is it what IIDC did to help Botswana create change? We kept on having, it was Heidi really that kept on saying, wait a minute, and asking questions. So we tried to correct that in the report, because the first version of the report was more about the methodology, and it was like, ugh. And it was all about tons of change that happened. But yeah, this is, we've tried to refresh, and we can do that more during the validation. So thank you for that good.
I can start? Okay. So on your point, thank you, Prof, for the presentation. On your point on uplifting the local voice in the global narrative, and what sounded to me like a subtle recommendation around African practitioners being knowledge brokers, and how that can team up with what you term power brokers, the professors, the guys that own the methodology. It got me thinking about, in your experience, is there a chance that that status quo can still be tweaked further? Can an African institution or body or collective or collection of practitioners actually present an alternative methodology that the powers that currently be, so to speak, not only power brokers but also owners of what knowledge is most valid? Is there a chance for that to happen, just to tweak the status quo so that we are not just settling for teaming up? But yeah.
Susan's going to answer that, but I will give you 2 words. I just want to say 2 words. Hell yes. Of course, and sorry for swearing, but yes, absolutely, 100%. Done.
Yeah, I think my reflection is similar. I'm looking at the power dynamics in this space. And maybe Samali and also, even calling Wellspring our mother. No, we have to really have an honest conversation here, because I think we have an opportunity of claiming this space. This business of having been given it under localization or whatever it is, this is a very unique point, a watershed moment, I believe. And this is my reflection, really, in all you're saying. And going back to what someone raised earlier about formal and informal systems, where are they? What has changed to me? What is evidence? Who defines that? And who defines the space in which we work? Those are the things that, for me, hopefully we'll be able to reflect a little more on, and how we then go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. It's going to take more, I'm not going to say another, but more courageous donors and governments, not just donors, but governments, to help fund this as well and shift those budgets. And absolutely, it can be done. We have another, I have a comment from Heidi, just before you go, just to say that once we gathered all the data, this is back to the process, there was a lot, right? And we did a thematic analysis, and that's how we came up with these areas. So we had to do a lot of qualitative coding and moving things into sections and what they reflected and what they meant. So that was a big part of the process. We didn't just sort of start writing. So really we need to take all that qualitative information, code it, put it into themes, put it into areas, and then produce what we could and then make sense of it, right? Go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. My reflection was on the common indicators, and I like you are saying that we need to have common indicators, and I think that builds in that it is going to help us strengthen the movement, of which the movement, when it is strong, it is going to help us now influence the narrative, both locally and globally. That's what I wanted to add on that. There is an advantage of having a common indicator.
Yeah, you're influencing, right? And you're influencing locally and regionally, but you're not influencing globally, and so it's got to go down locally and get stronger, and it's got to go up and be told. So yeah, the indicators are important because that's the language that some people speak. And you're all multilingual, I know that. You speak many languages. There's probably like, 42 languages in this room or something, plus English. So you need to use this fluency that you have and through documentation to, use the numbers. You have your numbers. I'm not anti-numbers, which you'll see in the next few slides, but you have to use them cleverly and strategically. I think there's another.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I want to ask, I know it might have not been maybe a strong focus from your side, but when you interacted with us, all the partners, I would love to hear from you whether there are stronger relationships built within us beyond the learning initiative that possibly could continue to exist beyond, because sometimes when a project ends, it ends with its indicators. But I would love to understand from you, from your experience when you interacted with us, the partners of the learning initiative, apart from what brings us maybe twice a year, and then we confess, we have learned, we share. Are there indicators, are there traces of stronger relationships within us, within the partners, something that you can be proud that even after the learning initiative, that we continue to coexist and share learnings beyond the learning initiative in terms of maybe really understanding each other, maybe working together, developing projects together. Because for me, that I would look at as a practical reality in terms of what we benefit from the learning initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. But I thought in the afternoon, we are going to look at each of these objectives and the findings. And as a cohort, we are going to validate by saying, is everything that we think should have been communicated under this communicated? Is everything clear? What's missing? What has to change? So it is you, actually, the evaluator just writes what they've had, but not like when you don't speak out, they wouldn't know. So, and it is okay if we finish the afternoon session and there's nothing to add and there's nothing to say about your question. It's still fine, because then it helps us to say, okay, how can we improve? If the learning initiative is just like in your perspective, like focusing on fewer elements and yet there should be other elements, how can we address those other elements going forward? So I thought maybe for that question, we keep it to ourselves to answer. And if we feel like, but we think it should have gone in this direction, that is the purpose of tomorrow's meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Mine is it's about the process, but it's closely related to what Joseph was asking. Did you only speak to the members of the initiative? Because I'm thinking if I want to go a step higher to understand the capacities that have been established, I would speak a bit outside the initiative to maybe the people that they, if it's a system issue, if we are trying to change a policy, you know, to have some policy action, I would engage some policy actors to see if what IIDC has helped the organizations do is contributing to change in from that perspective, basically asking outside the initiative, because very many times we describe change from what we have done and what it's probably beyond the scope of the assignment, but I thought I'd highlight that.
Yeah, thank you. We had limited time in the field. We did speak to one government person in Uganda, Lydia Wasula, who unequivocally talked about the impact of the partnership. So that was one. We tried in Tanzania to set an appointment up. It did not work because of the short time period. We would have loved to talk to a lot more policymakers. Ideally, a contributions approach would do exactly that, Claire. We also talked to Women Fund Tanzania, brought some of their Shinyanga grantees in. So it's still not the community, but it's getting close. We talked to a government worker from Shinyanga, as well as some of the CEOs of the smaller groups that were working in communities. So we touched on other people, but we did not go as deep as we wanted to, simply because of time and resources. But thank you for bringing that up.
I'll go again. Just reflecting again on the assessment, and I was because I go back to Deo's presentation, and somewhere in one of the slides, the idea was something to do with driven. What were the words? Driven, owned by the partners. Yes. It should be partner-centered, partner-driven, partner-owned. And I need to be ourselves collectively, and how we as partners have actually learned over the last, since 2015 or 2016. And somehow it comes off as if we're evaluating IIDC as an institution and not us collective. And I think that the orientation needs to be corrected, because in the comments, and that goes and speaks to a bit of what Joseph said, because we see it as an IIDC, not as our initiative, then even the questions around sustainability become a problem. Yeah, so it's just a reflection.
So I'd like to pick on from there. Yes, thank you very much. There seems to come out very strongly the interlinkages between the different components that have been presented. And the question that I'm thinking about following up from Timothy is, you know, even if as part take on some of these, and as we talk about localization, who is to define localization for us? Because we still seem to wait for the global north to define what localization is and how it needs to go. So we consistently miss out the opportunities that we should be taking on and sit waiting for someone. So how can we strengthen this brokerage to actually benefit us?
So those 2 points are really related. Just to say that the job, the consultancy, was to look at the contribution of the learning initiative to all of you, which is not separate, but as you say, interrelated to the strength of the organizations that make up the learning initiative, right? And Deo was reasonably humble about this was not our idea, and I also think IIDC is reasonably humble about saying they are not responsible necessarily for the success, but they facilitated it with you. So I think the answer to the question should come in the validation and the redirection of the learning initiative. Like, where are you going to go? Who's going to define what? People, you got it. You got that power like sitting in your pockets, and it's called knowledge. It is way more important than political power ultimately. because knowledge drives power, right? The fact that, well, I won't go and use an analogy, but knowledge drives power. So that's going to be up to you, I think, in the discussion about redirection here and here.
I have the mic. So thank you so much, Prof. And there's a lot to learn from there. I was just wondering, you spoke about a few hurdles here and there, some challenges with data. But were there real challenges in this journey that we could learn from, whether they come to the report or not? But in case we would want to do something like that in country, it would be good to have some lessons. Did it work because we had one donor, all of us? Would it have been different if we had multiple donors? I don't know, but those are the questions that are in my mind right now. These are all like real hard things. What are the soft things that made the learning possible? For me, I would want to hear those soft things that made it possible to work.
Just to say that I think the main soft thing is the people and the relationships. And that is something you cannot quantify, except to say there's 7 NGOs here and so many people and numbers like that. They're meaningless. The biggest soft skill is the people-centered processes and the way that people are involved and engaged, as we are right now here today. And that continues on, right? So, and there are lessons to be learned, and some of them are in the report about the data, but again, that's kind of a different consultancy, looking at the data. It's complicated stuff you're doing. Overall, the M&E improvements over time have been huge. And I think that each of the organizations can say, yes, we saw a reduction in this or an increase in reporting or whatever. So the data is there, but that's something we constantly strive for. Krista? Sorry.
Just a really quick one. In terms of methodology, I was just thinking through this, really wondering. Of course, our research institution came in a bit later, so we were not interviewed. But it would have really been nice to get a reflection of the spirit of collaboration in terms of how research actually contributes to all this. We are talking about an evaluation, which is a really important exercise. We are talking about costing of these programs. We know there are multiple fields that are all very important. A program person might not be well equipped actually to do all those evaluations. One person will not have all these skills that actually we are asking for and that we are actually sometimes recommending. So maybe in terms of recommendations, it's something that we might need to emphasize. Evaluations, strong research, collaborations that were on board. Did they make the picture any different? Could they be tapped into as we move forward in terms of the strengths that different people could bring on the table? But also I like the idea of that recommendation. It can be as a recommendation, or it's a finding for costing. Costing is really, really key because we are looking forward and we're thinking in terms of how to sustain ourselves. You can't just appear, maybe I'm the wrong person again, coming from this perspective of questioning, does it work? And how does it work? And how expensive would this be? We don't just do things for ourselves, but we do things to improve lives. Like in this case, to prevent Pvac. So what is it that is working? In what ways? So it could be through, there are different ways of evaluation, collection of evidence if you like. Even this approach and the little different things, big things you're doing, even just communication through email, it's also evidence. So we are slowly moving the field and also sitting on tables where we really push some of these, that even these soft social science methods of evaluation, where you go to a policymaker and discuss something, is a method. So just to encourage you that actually that's already being considered to a really higher level. It's just that documentation has to be right. So when we collect all those documents together, it's evidence in its own form. So we think we're on the right track if we really just keep our eyes so focused and keep documenting things that you think are not important.
Yeah, on this issue, I think Joyce is raising an important dimension. She's saying they came in late, but I think it's a very exciting development. When we started then, there was a bit of dichotomy. And there were organizations like, well, I'll say Raising Voices. And they had an RCT, they were global, and saying, learning initiative? What are you going to teach? Raising Voices. Evidence, measurement. They done been there, done that. No, yeah. But I was excited later on along the way to hear from them saying that they had learnt a lot from these other organizations. However, to answer the point that this is raising is that we conceptualize this from the beginning, from the perspective that everybody brings something to the table. Yeah, everybody is a learner and everybody is a teacher. Everybody takes, everybody gives. But for that to work, you need a good mix. So the real point I want to make is that, unfortunately, we didn't have, even if we had people who had done RCT, but they are not researchers essentially. So increasingly the exciting piece is that we've seen research organizations, AfriChild, NIMRI, coming. We've been struggling to get Child Health and Development Center into the fold, not yet here. But I think that is the evolution, that you actually need a blend, because the first convening was linking practice to research. And we need everybody on the table. So, right. Mr. Hasde.
Thank you for the rich discussion. I wanted to comment on the discussion that was happening a little earlier about the ownership, the direction, the vision coming from the partners or coming from IIDC, and how do we see that? And apologies if I missed something, Kati. Was there a feeling amongst the partners that they own it, that it's theirs, or was it, this is IID's thing and we are in it with them? I think that, that's just an interesting point to think about as you think about tomorrow, the future. If IIDC wasn't here, would these groups come together and continue learning in some other format or some other way? Thanks.
So one of the questions that we asked was, if the Learning Initiative were never part of your experience as an organization, what would have happened? And then people answered. It was an open-ended question. And then we said the other part was, as a result of the Learning Initiative, what did happen, that changed? So we asked two sides of the question. So I think, to answer your question, I think there is ownership, and I think a lot of organizations felt like they were good, and there are many good organizations here that do good work, and I do feel like they have their own sense of ownership, but that the initiative more than generally did help them. But that's a hard thing to squeeze out, right? And maybe we need to talk about that in terms of direction and going forward. Like, can you go forward without IIDC? Do you want to go forward without IIDC is an even bigger question. Because someone's got to
I don't think I was suggesting that, but I was just saying, like, as a marker of their own ownership of this, if there wasn't an IIDC, or would they search for another IIDC? Would they just work together collectively on this because they see it as a value and something that they own collectively?
I think that's a great question we can ask as we validate and think about the new direction.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeking to respond to the question. I think that's a collective question. But I would also like, as someone who is coming back to this group, I would like to share my reflection because, first of all, really appreciate the methodology because it's context specific. Right now, in the Sustainable Development Agenda, they're looking at innovative approaches to drive development. And they are underscoring leaving no one behind and reaching the farthest, the most farthest. What this means that they are recognizing that the solutions have to come within. So they are really looking at the global south as the ones that can champion this development. They are looking at partnerships, which I think this initiative by IIDC is one of those that is filling the gap by bringing practitioners together, learning institutions, and from the global south, and then them being a convener, a curator. I don't know what the name will be, but I see that we are beginning at the right journey. And again, to underscore the component you brought around working together with power brokers, because these power brokers, the UN, they are looking for partners who are coming out to say that, okay, we are trying out this, we are saying that it's working, and then this is the knowledge, this is the evidence. So here is generating that. And I was working in the Pacific last year, and they are starting with something similar. They are like the Pacific communities, they are working as practitioners. They're working with institutions like the universities and other institutions, and then they are supported by the government of Australia. They are really trying to put emphasis on learning. So I think it's an opportunity, and the timing is so right. So of course, resources is a question on the table, but I think we are doing everything right.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I think the timing is right. It's very exciting. A couple comments from Heidi on the common indicators that we had talked about. She's noting that these are also useful when you participate in national processes, right? So, such as working with NGOs and submitting a CRC report, right? If you can provide evidence to the national dialogue, that's really important. Secondly, the question about, were communities involved, to what extent do they feel ownership, et cetera, that she's suggesting that partners may want to follow up with their own assessments in the communities when their community members and partners could be interviewed about their engagement vis-a-vis you engaging with IIDC. And then another soft thing that we did, a soft skill besides the people, were another soft thing was the openers of the donor, not prescriptive. Yeah, I think it's just the donor approach, right, was another critical soft thing, is that the donor was not breathing down your neck and telling you what to do and how to do it. And in turn, that contribution allowed IIDC to do the same. So they were modeling that behavior of not telling you, change this, do that, but rather, what do you need? Make a choice from this list, and we'll come help you work with it. So that's another soft skill that was really critical. I hope I covered that, Heidi. Sure. So just in terms of final wrap up, and I think we'll probably use this this as we think about redirection. And this is just, again, thinking about old thinking and new thinking and positioning yourselves as new thinkers, right? New thinkers and new doers. So what causes change was the old one, right? Causality and closed system, and now it's what contributes to change. Before we were talking about everything evidence-based, and they still do it at Inspire, but it's really evidence-informed. It's very different, right, how it's informed. Defining measures and indicators was an old way, and it's what the outcome mapping can do for you. What works? There's been so many what works that have happened all over the world. Now we're thinking about how, why, and where things work, which you've done a beautiful job doing, right? counting things, very important before, right? Outputs and count, how many trainings, etc. Now it's about bringing together numbers and reflections and stories, which is something you are rich in, the combination of those things, right? The old thinking was validity and reliability, and now we're thinking more about usability. Can we use the data? Rather, is it valid or reliable? Old thinking, evaluation follows budget. The new thinking is evaluation focuses on innovation and what we don't already know. Old thinking was before and after measurement, post, pre and post design, and the new thinking is reflections on progress and change. You can still do those measures, but you need to think about in between. Old thinking, external evaluation for scrutiny, and the new thinking is embedded and transparent self-evaluation. That is exactly what we did with this. This was a self or selves evaluation, right? We did it together. This was not us. You talked to us, you told us. Old thinking was navigating and reporting on externally defined measures, and the new thinking is measures are defined for setting and reflected on for learning. And finally, the old thinking, which is still very prominent, right, in the corridors of power, is define measures and indicators, and the new thinking is collective learning. So people, you are like bang on to this right-hand new thinking column, and you've been doing it now for a decade, nearly a decade. We're 9.5 years into it, right? So go with that. You've got a lot of power behind you. So the old thinking is a top-down approach, right? And the old thinking for us in violence prevention is inspire strategies. I am not anti-inspire. I'm on the working group with Deo. I love inspire. I love what it's done for the world. I think it's really important. It proves that we can prevent violence, right? But the old thinking with that top-down approach is that the best way to do that is get your training, as it happened at a jamboree in Uganda, other events that you probably all attended. Use the technical Inspire working package and go to it. And you've all kind of said, not so easy, right? A little bit more complicated. And so what the initiative has done is fundamentally different than this top-down process. It does not mean that we ignore Inspire. It means we explain how, why, when, where, and what happens when Inspire strategies hit the ground. That is very different than just saying we can or cannot do this. And finally, the idea of being able to count the impact of work is scientifically really appealing, the numbers, the metrics, but the reality is that focusing on those numbers really obscures what we're trying to do, right? Because it's the people, right? In this case, the donor and the people that came together, and everyone in the room, your scientists in here, your policymakers, your donors, your organization directors, your staff, and of course the children we work for. Those are the people that make a difference and that are not necessarily relevant in the top-down approach. So the new thinking, that's you. I think you see, right, how you are new thinkers. This is this initiative, your bottom-up approach. Your accomplishments in general and overall are robust measures of change, and they are robust. I am a qualified professor and scientist, social scientist, and I can tell you they are robust measures. They're very, very good, and you need to advocate for them. You're delivering work in a variety of changing contexts and documenting it. You're generating relevant data and evidence that can help us understand, learn, and tell the story of the difference that you're making and how child protection, health, education, social work, police all play a role, in this process. The next steps, the big next steps, which I think we're going to talk about this afternoon, are you need to strengthen the local. We can't just look up at the global. We really need to continue to strengthen what we're doing on the ground. We're not there yet. You're on your way for sure, but with so much more. You have to strengthen those local understandings of change, generate more impact, and compare these to national data sets, right? So you can say, this is what we're doing compared to what's going on nationally, and it's working, right? Because this is where change is going to really impact children's lives, which is why we're all here. And finally, we need to uplift the partner findings as data and evidence and practice more explicitly into national agendas and the global platforms, because that will change how we approach VAC prevention in the field. You have the power to tell the people at WHO that there are different ways of doing this and achieving change. You have the power and you have the knowledge. All right, so just to sum up, I think we'll get to these questions and thoughts about redirection in the afternoon, but if you look at the back of your program, person with all these things coming out of it, again, a beautiful image for what you've done with the Inspire strategies, right? Nothing's linear. Nothing's in a closed system. Everything's going in lots of directions and influencing everything else, but you're getting there, and you're reducing violence. So it has been an honor for Heidi and I to be part of this process. We were both, it's actually giving me goosebumps just to be part of this, because I've seen the change myself. I told you I was here many years ago in Tanzania. The change is phenomenal in East Africa, and it's incredible what you're doing compared globally to what's happening. So congratulations. It's been a great honor, and thank you for sharing with us. And I look forward to this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Kathy. It seems the learning initiative is as complex as reducing violence against children. Because I felt like, okay, looks like we need an engine overhaul now. But it is fine. That is the intention of this meeting. You know, during the planning process, we were always thinking that, but how do we design this meeting and really like make sure that the sessions are relevant to the audience we are talking to? There is an audience that has been in the group for a long time and an audience that has just come in. But the thoughtfulness in this room is so comforting and makes me feel like, yeah, this is really fulfilling, that everyone is really keen and like contributing something strong in this space. So we are really pleased and humbled. I feel like every previous discussion makes us yearning and waiting for the next one. So the presentation of Kathy has set us off well to critique the findings and say, okay, this is what we want to add or change so that the report can be signed off. But then after that, then we shall go into tomorrow's discussion of saying, so what next? After this assessment, how do we reshape the learning initiative going forward? So we are going to go for our lunch break of 1 hour, and when we come back, we will work in groups to ensure that we read the findings of each objective, because you know, validation is like, it's like a few days after this meeting, they will finalize the report, but it is not their report, it is ours. So if it is ours, we must communicate what we think, you know, is the real issue in this report. So we really encourage and kindly request you to, you know, contribute as much as possible. The groups will be mixed. They will have people who are assessed or who have been in the initiative before, and those who are new. The purpose of those who are new is to ask questions on what they don't understand. Their questions might not be that they're influencing you to change the findings or to invent what didn't happen, but they will help us to suggest recommendations that we can further discuss and, you know, improve, shape out the learning initiative, and those will be tomorrow. So that's why we intentionally mix the groups. So when we come back, we'll look at the 3 objectives. That's objective 1, 2, 3. Each group will hand a different objective. But all groups will also look at the recommendations, because I think the intense discussion might be so much on the recommendations. As you're looking at the recommendations, they are universal. They are not split according to objective. Satisfy yourself that each objective has some good recommendations going forward, because the recommendations as they presented were, you know, touching on different aspects. And when you finish that, you can also look at the other objectives and say, what can we, you know, are all the objectives realistic? So that we don't just keep, rather recommendations are realistic, so that we just keep recommendations that we cannot address. So that will be basically the approach. And when we finish, we shall discuss. There's no better way to organize a validation, but we kindly, humbly request you to, you know, just stick with us, and we try to read and discuss this report kindly, because it's important for the initiative. And I am so happy that again and again I'm hearing the voices that are saying, this is not an IIDC thing, this is our thing. So please reshape your thing, you know, because we are here in this collective platform to learn together, and it's our thing and not an IIDC thing. So we should have better results out of it. I thank you very much, and I invite you for lunch, which is going to be served at the restaurant, you know, This oval shape is the restaurant. At least it's very nicely cool. We'll have our lunch up to 2 o'clock, and then we come back here to split and go into the group discussion. Thank you.